Steel Scorpion Sports, a better species of fantasy football. Welcome to the inaugural Steel Scorpion Sports Weekly Podcast. I'm half your hosting team, Jeff Miller, here with the founder of Steel Scorpion Sports himself, Mark Heflin. We'll be providing weekly fantasy football fodder for you on the podcast, sprinkled with a dash of humor, pop culture, and also, apparently, alliteration. If you're new to Steel Scorpion Sports, visit our website at steelscorpionsports.com to learn about a better species of fantasy football. All play, multipliers, mulligans, and much more. But enough about us, let's jump right into the meat of the week. Hef, how are you tonight?
Doing great.
All right, so we're 2 weeks into the fantasy season, and I have to say there are two things I've been focused on so far: injuries and fantasy surprises. On the injury front, do you remember a start to the season with more injuries to more key players in 2 weeks?
I really don't. It's been pretty crazy through the first 2 weeks, and especially week two. If you look at all the injuries that we had last week, you had A.J. Green, Jamal Charles, Milton Moreno, and most of all, they all went out pretty early. So not only did you get the injury and not be able to play them for maybe a few weeks after this, but you also got almost 0 points for them this week. You would think that they could have at least waited till fourth quarter, or maybe even the third, but early in the first is rough. And then further injuries, you have guys like Ryan Matthews, Ben Tate, Doug Martin, Mark Ingram, not to even mention the whole issues with Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson. And then you have smaller injuries to guys like Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, who was injured most of the week, but then actually did play in week two. Marvin Jones, who's been out all year. Jordan Reed injured again. Cameron Jordan, one of the top tight ends, missing in week two. Eifert is out for 7 to 8 weeks. Mercedes Lewis. There's just a ton of names, and even QBs now are going down. QBs are supposed to be safe with all the rules in place that can't even be touched, and yet RG3 injures an ankle while not being touched, and Carson Palmer has a nerve issue, which they're not even sure how long that's going to take to heal. He could be back in week 3. He might be out till week 7 or 8. You can't really tell. So the only good news is I don't think we've had any kicker injuries that I know of. Of course, Matt Prater's been suspended for the first few weeks. But then, it's looking like maybe next year we'll have to draft some team defenses in the first couple of rounds, because even though individual defensive players get injured, you at least know you're going to have that team defense to hold on to. They're not going to get injured. So, yeah, it's been a pretty crazy week with injuries.
Yeah, so I guess with no Grammatica brothers kicking anymore, no kickers have blown an ACL yet?
Yeah, Grammatica brothers are out, and kickers appear to be a little bit safer these days.
That's always nice. I feel safer taking kicker and D early in my draft next year then.
Exactly.
But seriously, I mean, this has been a rash of injuries, and you did say beyond the injuries, there are the issues with Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson, which we won't mention, so I won't mention them. But all these injuries, they are leaving me in pain, especially the Jamal Charles, who I started in the league, but we won't talk about that. So let's switch topics, because I want to be out of pain. Fantasy surprises through 2 weeks. Is it me, or is it no longer safe to draft a running back in round 1? Last year we had guys like C.J. Spiller, Doug Martin, Ray Rice, T. Rich, Trent Richardson for those of you who aren't in the know. They were all first-round running backs, and they failed to live up to maybe running back 2 status. This year, it's admittedly a small sample size, only through 2 weeks. Jamal Charles, Adrian Peterson, Matt Forte, Eddie Lacy, all these guys are top 6 picks in almost every format, and they're all killing their owners right now. So what gives? Why are so many experts wrong on these stud running backs now? Should I be going wide receiver in the first round? Or as you suggested earlier, should I be grabbing my team defense?
Definitely not kickers, but wide receivers do seem to be a little bit safer. The A.J. Green injury notwithstanding. And though, of course, you had Julio Jones getting injured last year as well. But in general, they seem to be a little bit safer, especially the guys like the big guys like Megatron and Demaryius Thomas. Those guys seem to be a little bit safer. And the running backs is kind of a mixed bag. You mentioned a lot of the names from last year that didn't do well. This year, we may be overreacting to the small sample size. It's only been 2 weeks, so we don't want to get too carried away. Lacey has faced a couple of good rushing defenses in the Jets and the Seahawks. The rest of his schedule should get easier going along, so we could see a breakout from him coming soon. Forte did not have a great game 2 against the Niners, but he did have a pretty good week 1. So, we could see some of those running backs bounce back. Obviously, there are some running backs that are still having great years. LaShawn McCoy, of course, would be safe. So, yeah, it may be something you want to look into, but you got to get one of those stud running backs just because there's so few of them these days. There's only, 5 or 6 kind of workhorse stud running backs. If you can get one of those, if you have a top 5 pick, you'll probably have to go running backs because it's the safest thing. But if you're outside of those top 5, top 6 guys, then yes, I think you definitely start looking who are the top wide receivers. If you're one of those that would want to take Jimmy Graham in the first round, personally, I probably would not. But he's definitely seems to be first round viable. You definitely have an advantage at tight end every week. But yeah, I think you have to definitely consider not going running back if you're not in the top 5 picks.
All right, and when you say top 5 stud running backs, I assume you're including T. Rich in that group?
I'm sorry, did you say top 55?
Oh,
because you have to know about that dude.
Sorry, I forget. You must have had him on your roster last year.
I did indeed, and it was a very painful experience, especially because he wasn't injured. You would keep thinking that, okay, this guy had a good rookie season in Cleveland. You kept thinking, okay, he's going to break out. Like the week that I decide to sit him, he's going to have 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. So you just keep putting him in your starting lineup, and you keep getting those, 19 carries for 54 yards and no touchdowns. You keep telling yourself he's going to break out, and he never really did. So it's quite painful.
All right, well, that should lead us right into what I want to talk about next. So let's turn our attention to the games themselves from Week 2. And let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly from a fantasy perspective, of course. So we'll just alternate on a couple of the games and then quickly talk about some of the rest of the games. But first, let's work backwards. So the Monday Nighter, Philly-Indy. Give me some thoughts on the game. Obviously, I don't want to say Trent Richardson looked like a first-round running back again, but wow, that may well have been his best performance in 2 years.
Maybe even in 3 years. I didn't watch a lot of him in year 1 when he was with Cleveland. Cleveland doesn't tend to be on TV all that much. I did see a fair amount of him the year before when he was with Alabama. He seemed like a real, true, good running back when he was with Alabama. They probably had a better offensive line than maybe some NFL teams do these days. But yeah, he actually looked good on Monday night. I don't know if that means that maybe we're seeing a resurgence from T-Rich, or if it means that if you have a fantasy running back on your roster that's playing the Eagles, that you need to start him and maybe even multiply him for that week. Because if they're able to make T-Rich look that good, then maybe they can do the same for some of the other lower level running backs.
So is that an advocation for Philly to tighten up the D while they face Washington this week? Because obviously Washington has a decent running back. Are you hinting at who a multiplier should be?
I am. It might be a good week to multiply Alfred Morris against the Eagles defense. And especially maybe this week, because now that, Kirk Cousins is starting, they may not adjust the game plan specifically to him too much in this week. That may happen kind of more later as we go along week to week. They customize the offense more to Kirk Cousins, so maybe this week they do a lot of running and maybe Morris gets a lot of carries, and maybe the Eagles make Morris look like a first-team AP All-Pro.
Nice. Well, one other good thing I noticed out of the game, Zach Ertz. So, I don't know if you noticed, but Zach Ertz, in 2 games this season, already has 6 catches of 20 yards or longer. That's pretty nice for a tight end. Now, obviously, part of that's the Chip Kelly, the fun offense, the up-tempo, and Zach Ertz, a good athlete, gets out in space and can find seams and corner routes that seem to be open. But I think from a good perspective, that's the good I took away, that and Trent Richardson looking like an NFL running back.
And, yeah, you mentioned Ertz. He definitely seems to be one of the breakout tight ends of this year, like a lot of people were predicting. But the stat you mentioned, I believe, if I remember the stat correctly, I saw on Twitter today that you mentioned the 6 catches of 20 yards or more. He has more of those than 20 other NFL teams do. So obviously he's not going to continue that pace. By the end of the season, I'm sure that will not still sustain itself. But yes, he is definitely a tight end that you would want to look at. Hopefully you drafted him. And if you do have him on your roster, he's someone that you can definitely start every single week.
I don't know. I think by the end of the season, he still may have more 20-yard receptions than the Jags, the Raiders. Maybe not 20 teams, but maybe 10.
I don't even know if I'll go 10, but maybe 4 or 5. You definitely mentioned a couple candidates there with the Jaguars and the Raiders, and maybe there's a couple others, but yeah.
All right. I kid because I care, Oakland fans. Speaking of the Monday night game still, what did you think was the bad and the ugly? So we talked about the good, but obviously not all games and not all fantasy results are good.
Well, I think probably the ugliest thing, if you're a Colts fan, the refs definitely kind of inserted themselves into the game. I thought that, pass interference was one of the things that they were supposed to focus on this year. And if you saw the interception that went through, it was about a 10-yard pass, and it went directly into the stomach of the Philly linebacker. And it just seemed strange because, Andrew Luck is one of the top quarterbacks. He has pretty good accuracy. Why is he throwing directly to the Philadelphia linebacker? Then you see the replay. You see T.Y. Hilton getting pushed down to the ground, and all of a sudden, it makes sense. Refs didn't call it, so now the Eagles have the ball. You think, okay, maybe the refs have heard, they've seen the replay, they think, okay, we need to make a call here, we need to help Indy out. But instead, they thought that they were supposed to make up a call, literally, so they decided to throw a flag and make up a phantom horse collar call that, again, when seeing the replay, it was not a horse collar, it was 100% grabbing the jersey and pulling him down. It was a great tackle. It would have been 3rd and 6 at that point, and maybe they didn't convert, maybe they have to punt, and maybe the Colts ended up winning the game. So that was unfortunate for Colts fans. It was also unfortunate for one specific fan in Delaware. Some people probably saw the story today. He had picked 14 games against the spread. He had 1 game to go, and he had the Colts -3. Of course, as we all know, the Colts ended up losing the game, and he lost. He would have won $100,000. Fortunately, he only lost $5, but to invest $5 and win $100,000 would have been pretty crazy. So he is probably the most upset of anyone at this point. But it was a crazy game, back and forth, and fairly high scoring. But the Colts and the Eagles, you might expect it to be a little bit more high scoring, but a good game in the end.
Well, maybe those referees can make it up to at least to the guy in Delaware, since they can't make it up to the Colts. Maybe they can send him their paychecks for the week, since they didn't earn them.
They should. They do own that, that's for sure.
All right, well, that's enough about the Monday night game. What about the Sunday night game? We have the Bears opening up the new Levi Palace in San Francisco against the Niners. And who saw the Bears coming from behind with their beat-up receiving core and beating San Francisco in the stadium opener? I clearly didn't. I imagined with Alshon Jeffrey, with Brandon Marshall hobbled. I'm not even sure Jeffrey was running on one leg. He might have been hopping on one leg at times. Marshall's a gamer, I'll give him that, but I didn't see a comeback in the cards for the Bears.
No, and a lot of people didn't. In fact, in some of the in-game wagering markets, if you are a gambling type, there are some sites that offer in-game wagering, and at one point it was estimated that the Bears had a 5% chance of winning. So clearly based on, that's all based on prior history and prior stats of games, and 5% is not very good. So they were looking at a pretty small chance, but they came back. They hung in there. Clearly Kaepernick, with some of his questionable decision-making, helped them out. But the interesting thing from a fantasy standpoint is that, you mentioned Marshall and Jeffrey, and most people have been saying that they probably weren't going to play. I know that there were some tweets going out saying that there was a 75% chance that neither one of them would play. And being that it was in the late game, you had to make a roster choice if you wanted to start them or not, and unless you had another receiver from the Niners, the Eagles, or the Colts, you probably had to play it safe, put Marshall and Jeffrey on your bench and put someone else in. But, of course, as it turned out, Jeffrey didn't have that good of a game. I think he had 3 catches for 20, 30 yards, something like that. But Marshall, man, he only had 5 catches, but 3 of them were for touchdowns. So he had a pretty big game, and it's just unfortunate if he had that big game from your bench.
Yeah, I don't want to name names, Adam Schefter, but those tweets with the 75% likelihood that Marshall and Jeffrey wouldn't play seem a little off. I'm just saying, considering both played. It's just me.
Yeah, considering both played, and the other aspect to mention is Brandon Marshall in our still Scorpion format with the half-point PPR, I think he ended up scoring around 26 fantasy points. The one good thing is you get 1 mulligan per year, and you hate to maybe burn it in week 2, but if you did bench Marshall and he has 26 points, and maybe one of your starting wide receiver or flex guys only had, say, 4, 5, 6 points, something like that, you decide to use the mulligan, you make the switch, you pick up an extra 20 points, and maybe you pick up an extra 3 or 4 wins in the standings, and maybe those 3 or 4 wins end up getting you into the playoffs at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think that's one beauty of the multiplier all-play leagues with the mulligan is most standard ESPN leagues, as they're always wanting to call out, probably had a very low active rate for Brandon Marshall. I'd wager it was probably in the 10 to 15% range. In a Steel Scorpion Sports League, you probably have the same percentage starting Brandon Marshall, but with the mulligan, as you said, you could pull him out off the bench before the Monday night game and say, hey, I made my one bad call. I blame Adam Schefter for it, but I have a mulligan here. I get to insert him back into my lineup, get those 26 points, especially, as you said, if you started someone, say a 4 or 5 point wide receiver. There were plenty of those. Say you started Torrey Smith, got 1 point, 1.5 points. Way to go, Torrey. He's going to get 100 balls this year, though. Don't forget. Joe Flacco said so.
Yeah.
He's on pace for, I think, 12.
Again, I think he's going to finish up slightly more than 12 at the end of the season.
Well, this is Overreaction Wednesday, so sorry about that.
True.
All right, I did want to mention one ugly. I think you already touched on it from the game, but Colin Kaepernick and judgment. Quarterbacks are going to throw interceptions. Not a concern at all. But when you throw deep down the middle against the single high safety look and you throw late, you're asking to be intercepted. And when you run out to the left and you throw back across your body to the right, just trusting your arm strength is going to get it across 2 or 3 defenders and get it to your guy, again, you're asking for those balls to be intercepted. So it's one thing to throw interceptions. All quarterbacks do. Even Nick Foles threw 2 last year. But Kaepernick's judgment, it's just embarrassing at times. And this is the guy that is supposed to revolutionize the quarterback position, according to many commentators and blowhards.
Well, I will say Kaepernick has a very strong arm, and on Sunday night he looked like a little bit of a gunslinger. He actually looked like the quarterback that he was facing, Jay Cutler, who has somewhat of the same reputation. Those guys with the really powerful arms who think they can fit the ball into the smallest of windows, and sometimes they can, and other times they do not. But they definitely do not have the same judgment, the same accuracy as some of the other guys like a Breeze or a Manning or a Rodgers. And, they think they can make every single throw, and sometimes they don't. And in times like Sunday, it ends up costing his team the game.
Yeah, enough said there. So anything from the afternoon or morning games you want to touch on? I mean, there were a couple of really interesting contests. Denver, KC. I think we already mentioned the Jamal Charles injury. I think that was the biggest outcome of that. San Diego, Seattle. By the way, my Antonio Gates, 3 touchdowns. Thank you, Old Man River. And believe me, I did see that coming. Oakland, Houston. Yeah, well, I'm not going to talk about that. Green Bay, New York Jets. Interesting game there. Jordy Nelson, I think he had a good game. I'm not 100% certain, but I think he might have not only won you some wins with his play on the field, but he probably got you a yardage win too.
He did, in fact, with 209 receiving yards. Anybody that started him, he had the highest of the week. So if you started him, and I don't know of any reason why you wouldn't have, because he's one of the top 10 wide receivers, then yes, you picked up a yardage win for having him lead the league in receiving yards. And then a couple of other games you mentioned with Gates with the 3 touchdowns, quite a game. I think that's probably the best game we'll see from him the rest of the year. He'll have some other good stats, but I doubt we'll see 100 yards, 6 catches, and 3 touchdowns anytime soon. Oakland, Houston, I think similar to last year, we've pretty much already seen that Oakland is a pretty bad team. Not only are they 0-2, but they've lost to the Jets. And yes, they had to travel cross country, but still, it's the Jets. And then they lost at home to Houston. And, Houston obviously is not going to be a better team than the 2-14 team from last year, but Oakland's going to be bad again this year. And then the other thing for the one of the afternoon games, Bobby Rainey looked really good against St. Louis. And St. Louis does not have a bad defense. So he's doing that against a legit defense. And the one thing you have to wonder there is, what is the status of Doug Martin? And I don't just mean health-wise. I mean, when Doug Martin is fully healthy and able to play again, how many of the carries is he going to get? Are they going to start giving the ball to Bobby Rainey full-time and they use Doug Martin as a change of pace, maybe on third down? Doug Martin is a good pass catcher. But if I'm Tampa Bay, I'm starting to think about making Bobby Rainey my starting running back.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I mean, at some point you have to say, I put these running backs behind the same offensive line. One of them looks like a pro running back, and one of them never gains any yards. At some point, you have to go with the guy that actually gets you yards, and that's Bobby Rainey, in my opinion.
In fact, in week 1, Doug Martin had 9 carries for 9 yards, and that's not even rich territory. Terry Richardson, gets you a solid 2.7 usually. 1 yard per carry, that's sub-T Rich. In baseball, they talk about the Mendoza line. Maybe T Rich is the Mendoza line for yards per carry, and Doug Martin, so far, is, again, small sample size, but so far, well below the T Rich line.
Yeah, that's crazy. Oh, and another ugly I wanted to touch on from that Green Bay New York Jet game. We talked about the good of Jordy Nelson. Aaron Rodgers obviously good as well. The ugly would be Rex Ryan and the incompetence that is the New York Jets sideline and coaching staff. So Jet fans out there, good luck with the rest of the season. Your coach has already cost you probably 1 win this year. Won't be the last.
Yeah, that was an unfortunate situation for them. Marty Morningweg trying to call the timeout, and obviously Rex Ryan. You could blame Marty Morningweg, but Rex Ryan should probably have more control of his sideline. That's not something that you would probably see on a Bill Belichick sideline. I can't imagine one of his assistants running up and down the field like crazy trying to get a timeout. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back on Monday night. We've got a decent game Monday night between the Bears and the Jets. Touching back on the fantasy implication with Marshall and Jeffrey. Don't know what their status is going to be this week. It's just Wednesday night that we're recording this. We don't know if they're going to play or not. But if it struggles along and we don't know and they don't say until Monday, you may be in a similar situation, and actually even worse because you don't even have, with the Sunday night game, you had a Monday night game to fall on. Unless you have a Jets receiver, so maybe if you have Eric Decker, because what other fantasy relevant wide receivers do the Jets have? So, and even Eric Decker got injured in the last game, so I'm not sure what his status is for this week. But if you had Eric Decker, you could maybe have a situation where you decide to start Decker or Marshall or Jeffrey, depending on what you hear. But it could be one of those situations where you end up benching Marshall and or Jeffrey again this week, and maybe they play or maybe they don't. We'll have to wait and see.
Yes, and his name is Jeremy Curley, by the way, the other relevant Jet receiver. I'm just saying.
I would say that Jeremy Curley is active in a pretty small percentage of leagues, and if you are in a league such as the Steel Scorpion League, where you get points for kickoffs and punt returns, then I would guess that Curley has a little bit extra value, but not a whole lot.
Fair enough. And then the other ugly point I wanted to bring up from the weekend is all the hype that we all bought into on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. all the experts told me how great Tampa Bay was going to be. I actually started buying into that, thinking Lovie Smith was all they needed. Boy, does that look wrong now.
Yeah, it sure doesn't seem to be. Yeah, they were definitely one of the popular over-under candidates as far as gamblers go. Their over-under total was 7.5. A lot of people were jumping on the over, thinking they could at least get to 8-8. New quarterback, new coach, better defense, even with the loss of Revis. At least that was the thinking. But of course now they are 1-2. Both of those losses have been at home. And it's not like they lost at home to the Seahawks and the Broncos either. They lost at home to the Panthers.
But the Panthers
were good last year.
Yeah, the Panthers are a good team, and Cam Newton's tough.
Except that they had a lot of roster turnover in the offseason with receivers and offensive line especially. They were a major regression candidate. And, of course, Cam Newton did not even play in that game. So they lost to Derek Anderson in Week 1, only to turn around and lose at home in Week 2 to the St. Louis Rams, quarterbacked by Austin Davis, the same St. Louis Rams team that got blown out at home in Week 1 to the Vikings. So it's looking pretty bad for the Buccaneers right now, especially they're in one of the tougher divisions. Everyone always mentions the NFC West or the NFC North. But the division they're in, the NFC South, you've got the Saints, who, yes, they're 0-2, but they're going to bounce back. There's still a lot of people that think they could be a Super Bowl team. The Panthers are 2-0. They're obviously better than people were thinking they were going to be. And the Falcons are 1-1, with their one loss being a tough road loss to the Bengals. And they're going to be, at least a 9, maybe 10-win team this year. So I think you can pretty much write the Bucs off this year. They're not going to make the playoffs, and they should maybe start looking at the 2015 draft and scouting some players.
Fair enough. My bad for buying into the Tampa Bay hype. So I think that's all I wanted to cover on any games. So Mark, with that, I'm going to jump right into the standings in our Steel Scorpion Sports Leagues. So our first league that we'll touch on is the Leopard League. And it looks like the Keller Kid is topping the league currently. So remember, in the all-play format in Steel Scorpion Sports, there are 11 wins up for grabs for the top team, all the way down to 0 wins for the last place team every week, and there are 3 yardage wins for top passer, top rusher, top receiver in any given week. So you can theoretically make up 14 wins in a week on someone. So while Keller Kid right now sits atop the standings with 20 wins, and Shane Falco's in last with 3, in any given week, 14 wins up for grabs, you can see this narrow in quite a bit of a hurry. Mark, so how about the Jellyfish League? How's that looking?
The Jellyfish League is a lot more bunched up than the league that you just discussed, where the top team had 20 and the bottom team had 3. The Jellyfish League is the free challenge league that we're doing. We have 2 teams managed by Steel Scorpion, and you're managing one of them, I'm managing the other. And if teams finish out of both of our teams, they get a $150 team for next year. And if you still get one of them, you get a $50 league for next year. Right now, people are doing pretty well. We have 5 teams that are ahead of both, and then another 4 teams that are at least ahead of one. But the standings are pretty bunched. I think we're going to see a lot of change over the next 10 weeks. Currently, we have 2 teams tied at the bottom with 7 wins. And at the top, we have a really impressive team name with 18. And I'm not just saying that it's a really impressive team name. That actually is the name of the team. Really impressive team name. So I'm pretty sure that person works for a marketing firm, something like that, with the ability they have to name their team. But things are pretty bunched from 18 to 7. A lot of teams in the middle, 10, 12, 12, 12, 13, 13. So we should see things start to separate out over the next few weeks here.
All right, but as you mentioned, 5 teams look like they were ahead of both and 4 ahead of one. But as Kenny Rogers, and I believe that's Aaron Rodgers' father, once said, you never count your money when you're sitting at the table or in the computer chat room or online. It was something like that, I'm fairly certain. But
yes, something like that. So yes, that's a good point. Those teams that they shouldn't be banking on their free leagues for next year yet, because we plan on putting up a challenge, and we plan on kind of hopefully rising through the rankings and showing what our teams are made of over the course of the season.
Yes, I completely agree. One thing I wanted to mention about the Leopard League I spoke of before, it was the league we drafted live on War Room Fantasy Sports Radio. So that one, again, 20 wins in first, 3 down is the last place team. We wanted to, again, thank the guys from War Room Fantasy Sports Radio. They're in the league. You can compete against experts. And if you participated in that, you could hear your draft live. So watch for that next year as well. Want to keep our relationship going with War Room Fantasy Sports Radio. In our last league, the Jaguar League, the beauty of all play is on display. So we had teams in week 1 that dogged and then rebounded in week 2. But currently, we have a team giving ends to their friends who's top in the league. They had weeks of 10 wins and 12 wins, so that's a pretty solid start to the season. So we've got 22 at the top. All the way down at the bottom, we've got a team with the moniker of Arctic Spiders with 2 wins. Count them, 2. And as that owner informed me, if this were a head-to-head league, he'd be averaging a win a week. That's a great thing. Not so great in an all-play format, but really great in head-to-head. Again, that's why all-play is so much better. It's not winning one game in 1 week, or perhaps having the second highest score and losing. It's about beating all the teams all the time, playing all the other guys, having a shot at 11 wins. So we have 22 at the top and 2 at the bottom, but in 2 weeks, Arctic Spiders could climb right back into this, be back in the top 2 or 3, give or take. I have complete confidence in Arctic Spiders, which is not me, in case anyone's curious. Anything you want to add on the Jaguar League, Mark?
Just for everyone out there, the Jaguar League is the inspiration and the genesis for this site. It's a league that we've run offline for the last 3 years. We call it the Multiplier Madness League. So we've got some experienced multiplier players in this league, people that know what they're doing, people that have some good multiplier strategy, which we'll probably cover at some point over the next few weeks. That'd be a good topic for us to discuss as far as multiplier strategy, as far as how you decide who you're going to multiply each week. But yeah, that was a good recap of the Jaguar League.
Yeah, and again, for those new to the format, the multiplier, again, a key component to this. The mulligan, something most people aren't familiar with. We touched on that earlier, replacing somebody from your starting lineup with somebody from your bench who exploded. The Brandon Marshall example was what we used this week. We'll keep touching on that in future podcasts to make sure that everybody knows how the multiplier has impacted the league standings or the weekly standings, how the mulligan comes into play when it does. And also, we'll keep touching on the yardage wins. Again, this week, Jordy Nelson blew up. Boom, that's an extra win for you just for having Jordy Nelson. Some lucky owners had DeMarco Murray, had the rushing lead both weeks. 2 extra wins just for being smart enough to draft DeMarco Murray.
And one more thing I'll mention on the multipliers, we haven't mentioned this yet. This is, anyone listening to this that is unfamiliar with our format. Please visit the site. But we do want to mention on multipliers, you can't just draft, a Peyton Manning or an Aaron Rodgers or something like that and multiply them every single week. There's not really much strategy at all involved in that. You can only multiply a player once. So that's where the strategy comes in. You have to look at their matchup. You have to decide, okay, it's this the week that I want to multiply this player, because you can multiply Peyton Manning in week 1 if you want, but that's it. You're not going to be multiplying again the rest of the season. So you kind of want to map out your plan a little bit, like when you're going to multiply a quarterback. Obviously, when your quarterback is on his bye week, it might be a good week to multiply whatever backup QB you have. And then, of course, with your stud running backs and receivers, you're going to want to look for some good matchups against bad defenses. But, if this format is new to you, just don't think that you can multiply the same guy every week. You got to do it once for one player and then figure out when to multiply the other players in your roster.
Yeah, good point, Mark. And again, for anyone that wants to learn more about Steel Scorpion Sports and the rules, go to steelscorpionsports.com. Click on the rules tab. You'll see all the rules, how we play. You'll learn more about all play, multipliers, mulligans. And really, you'll see why we consider Steel Scorpion Sports a better species of fantasy football. Well, that does it for the first podcast. Tune in next week for more Steel Scorpion Sports League updates. And remember, tell your friends about Steel Scorpion Sports, a better species of fantasy football. Signing off from San Diego, California, Jeff Miller.
And from Santa Clara, California, Mark Esma.
Good night, everybody.